We all know Santa lives at the North Pole, right? Or is the rumor that he has a summer house here in the U.S. true? Travelers, it's time to put on your cold weather gear and join us for a special sleigh ride edition as we go beyond the exits. Santa Claus, Indiana loves itself some Christmas, with Santa statues, a Santa store, Santa castles, even a Santa Claus land. It makes one ponder the origin story behind the over 170-year-old town and its evergreen love for the holiday, not to mention its affinity for that right jolly old elf. But before we do, let's get our bearings. Getting there is easy. Santa Claus is not far off Interstate 64. Using exit 57A or B at Dale, Indiana. Simply follow the South US 231 route until you see exit 63. Turn east and drive 4 miles to your destination. The town today is best known for its major amusement park, Holiday World and Splash and Safari, which brings over 1 million guests every year, making it the biggest tourist destination in this region. Not to mention the fact that the Santa Claus Post Office receives and answers the most letters to Santa in the world. So how exactly did a North Pole copy wind up surrounded by farmers' fields? I mean, it doesn't even really snow that much in this part of Indiana. To discover the answer, we are going to have to jump back in time to 1849. When a group of German immigrants began to settle this area, the town grew and agreed on a name for itself in 1854, Santa Fe. By 1856, they were large enough for a post office. However, as their luck would have it, the federal government thought the name was too close to the existing Santa Fe, Indiana, and a name change would be required to secure that post office. The town has a few stories on how the name came about, but the most popular one goes something like this. The townsfolk were all gathered at a church in the area to find a solution to their dilemma. It was Christmas Eve, and snow had been softly falling while they met. Suddenly, the children that had been outside playing burst into the building and announced they had heard Santa's sleigh bells ringing in the night. The problem was solved, and Santa Claus Indiana's post office was approved under its new name. Kind of leaves you with a warm feeling, doesn't it? Yet it doesn't explain why this wonderful little hamlet became so famous for its Christmas spirit. So let's jump forward to 1914, where the next part of our story unfolds. Santa Claus's 14th postmaster, Jim Martin, didn't know it when he began his turn, but he was about to change the destiny of his little town. You see, through a strange occurrence, in the early 1920s, letters to the town's namesake, Santa Claus, began showing up. Rather than discarding or returning them, though, Mr. Martin took it upon himself to instead answer them, thinking it was good for the children. To his surprise, more letters and even packages began to appear, many hoping to get the Santa Claus postal stamp on them. And while the fame of this little Christmas oddity was growing, it wasn't until 1930 that a small mention in a Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon panel propelled the post office and Mr. Martin to near superstardom for the time. Suddenly, that postmark was a hot commodity, and the post office was completely overwhelmed. As the news spread, the postmaster made this quote, "I guess my name ought to be Santa Claus, because I have to pay out of my own pocket for handling all this mail. I've hired 6 clerks to help out, and I reckon it's going to cost $200, but it advertises the town. And besides, lots of folks from all around come out to the store to see us sending out the mail." Everyone loved the attention the town was receiving. That is, everyone but the United States Postal Service. Extra resources had to be applied to handle the additional parcels. So in 1931, it was reported that the USPS intended to force Santa Claus, Indiana, to change its name or lose its post office. The townsfolk were furious. They weren't going to allow Santa Claus to be stripped of its identity without a fight. So the local constituents reached out to their congressional representatives and were answered. U.S. Representative John Bone sent a notice to the USPS declaring that the entire Indiana delegation stood opposed to the call for a name change. U.S. Senator James Watson went so far as to meet with the U.S. Postmaster General Walter Brown to share his sentiment face to face. Needless to say, the town got to keep their name. Thus, a wonderful holiday tradition of volunteers answering letters to Santa continues strongly today. But that is not the end of our story, at least not the one about a Santa Claus theme park or several theme parks. It's 1935, and Milt Harris, an entrepreneur from nearby Vincennes, Indiana, is hoping to make good on the town's newfound fame. He built the first tourist attraction there, Santa's Candy Castle, sponsored by the Curtis Candy Company, who were best known for Baby Ruth and Butterfinger candy bars. Harris incorporated as Santa Claus of Santa Claus Incorporated, announcing plans to build Santa Claus Town. However, Milt Harris was not alone. A Chicago businessman named Carl Barrett, the very same year, built a 22-foot-tall Santa Claus statue out of granite, hoping to anchor and advertise his plans for a Santa Claus park. He named his company Santa Claus Incorporated. So the competition began for these two businessmen to destroy each other and frustrate the little town in the process. 1936 saw lawsuits filed by both men amidst this tiny community of no more than 100 residents. Barrett claimed Harris had no rights to the Santa Claus name, as it was so close to his own. Harris claimed that he had already leased the land Barrett's location sat on. A judge placed an injunction on Barrett's property, halting the Santa Claus Park construction. However, what was worse, the ruling prevented anyone from using the Santa Claus name as a theme. It would not be until 1940 that the Indiana Supreme Court overturned this decision, allowing the park's plans to resume. However, by this time, World War II was at hand. Rationing of gasoline and tires limited travel, strangling the cash flow to these two businesses and preventing the two men from completing their dreams. Santa's Candy Castle shut its doors, and the beloved statue was abandoned altogether. Many things changed for Santa Claus after World War II. Retired industrialist Lewis Cook was dismayed that the town had no way for children to see the man in red if they came to visit. Cook had to correct this travesty. How did he do it? He opened Santa Claus Land, which is alleged to be the first theme park in the world, led by Lewis's son Bill Cook. The park continued expanding its operations until it could go no further with the Christmas theme alone. So, in 1984, the park renamed itself Holiday World, including new holiday-themed areas such as Independence Day and Halloween. Later, with the addition of an enormous water park, the name was changed again, this time to Holiday World and Splash and Safari. Another expansion later added a Thanksgiving area as well. Today, Santa Claus is a thriving tourist destination. As we mentioned earlier, the park alone sees more than 1 million visitors every year to its restaurants, RV park, and themed gift shops, not to mention the amusement park. As you can imagine, the town really shines at Christmas. The original post office, church, refurbished Santa statue, and the amazing Santa's Candy Castle are must-sees during your visit. But we have one last stop in our story, and it appropriately centers around St. Nick, or at least the man who used to be known as the Santa of Santa Claus Land, Mr. Jim Yelig. Jim's daughter, Patricia Pat Yelig, was raised here in the 1930s and 40s. After leaving to serve as a nurse in the Daughters of Charity Order, she returned home and married Bill Cook, then owner of Santa Claus Land. After many years together, Pat decided she would share the many memories and stories of her experiences by creating a museum dedicated to her community. That museum is a wonderful walk through the history of a little town with an unusual name. Should you choose to visit Santa Claus, Indiana at Christmas time, you will surely enjoy the wonderful light displays, the delicious hot cocoa, and the many seasonal activities, including a chance to sit on Santa's lap and share your secret Christmas wishes. However, I believe the most beautiful memory you will carry away will be witnessing the many volunteers joyfully working as Santa's helpers, answering his letters from all over the world, just as it has been done here for over a century. A very Merry Christmas to all, and may God bless you deeply.